with the Conservative Party's raising of reclassification of the entire cannabis question as a major election issue. The Labour government was accused of that pervasive yet unpardonable sin, very soft on drugs. The government was keen to demonstrate that it was, on the contrary, very tough on drugs. Remarkable about the turn on cannabis reclassification was that, oh yeah, that's fine. 2 minutes I've got, so I'll rattle through. This consisted of, the remarkable about turn on cannabis was allegedly prompted by new scientific evidence. This consisted of several research reports which indicated or claimed to indicate that more powerful and persuasive evidence had emerged to demonstrate a causal link between the use of cannabis and mental health problems, and particularly the onset and aggravation of schizophrenia. In March 2005, the Home Office announced that it would once again submit the question of the proper classification to the ACMD and insisted that it would be irresponsible not to do so in light of the new evidence. The Advisory Council reviewed the research, most of which it had researched several times before. It concluded that there was no proven causal link between cannabis and mental illness, and the association between these phenomena could be explained in either non-causal cultural ways. It was stated that there was little doubt that cannabis use could aggravate already existing mental health problems and call for increased public education and further research. Very sensible. It concluded that while cannabis did pose significant dangers, there was not of the same order of other Class B drugs, such as amphetamines, and the reclassification to Class C should stand. The recommendation was once again accepted by the government, and of course we should infer nothing from the fact that by this time the election had been safely won. Maybe we will all have time for some questions and answers shortly, but I would like to make a few points about the cannabis and madness debate in the UK. As we have seen, the assertion of a link between cannabis use and the kind of states of mental confusion which may get labelled as mental illness is far from being a new one, but it is worth examining briefly again. The research which claims to demonstrate a causal link, in fact, does not do so, for a simple but profound methodological reason. One cannot isolate human beings from the social and cultural contexts in which their experiences are shaped. One cannot put them in the laboratory and identify the single variable that has caused these unhappy mental states. In reality, our experience and conduct is so subtle and subject to multiple dependencies that the isolation of cannabis use as a factor of responsibility is impossible. All this research can do at best is to point cautiously to some associations and links that need further investigation. So let's assume for now that some of the studies are correct, that there is a linkage of some sort between madness and cannabis use. What kind of linkage might it be? It might be of a similar sort to another empirically derived link, that between cannabis and musicians and artists. While some have suggested a causal explanation here too, it is much more likely that we are dealing with cultural links and relationships. The fact that it's those people who play in rock and reggae bands in our culture are often the same people who are attracted to using cannabis. Smoking pot doesn't mean you'll suddenly turn into Bob Marley or Jimi Hendrix, that you'll suddenly become creative and inspired. Instead of a causal relation, we have a cultural proximity. Artistically creative and inspired people our age have appeared, sometimes more likely to experiment with or indeed make regular use of illicit drugs. The same goes for those who are likely to get into mental trouble. Smoking pot doesn't mean you go mad, rather the tendency to go looking for answers or for inspiration in inner experiences to defy social convention and transgresses traditional limits. Those are the kind of attributes that lead people towards both drug use and madness, and often enough, incidentally, towards creativity, revelation, self-exploration. I could go on. So again, I would argue that we're dealing here with complex cultural linkages, not causal pharmaceutical ones. But even if we were dealing with the kind of direct cause and effect issue posed by some of those involved in the UK debate, this does not mean that even more stringent legal suppression is the way to go. Dr. Lydia Cravendale, one of the authors of the research carried out by Maastricht University, claimed to identify a doubling of the probability that cannabis use could lead to psychosis, says, "I don't think the effects of cannabis can be used as an argument not to legalize it. It is probably very hard to ban it altogether, and if you legalize it, you can regulate it more effectively." Yeah. Ultimately, however, the causal argument does not fit with the evidence. Cannabis use has expanded exponentially amongst the UK population since the 1960s, with an estimated 3 million regular users. Indeed, according to our recent European report, some 35% of young people in the UK use cannabis, making us much more like youth than our other European cousins. No corresponding expansion of psychotic conditions has taken place. If cannabis is a causal link attributed to it by its vehement critics, the prevalence of schizophrenia could be expected to grow at a corresponding rate. In fact, as you will all know, the levels of diagnosis remain stable at around 1 in 100. We should, I think, acknowledge that it seems likely that those who are already experiencing mental problems or in whom such a addiction may be latent could find their difficulties made worse by the use of cannabis. This is more acutely the case in those for whom the development process of maturing are incomplete. Like any drug, cannabis is dangerous if used unwisely. And like any drug, informal cultural regulations which develop organically from using it are better controls than repressive measures taken by those who simply disapprove of drug use on moral or philosophical grounds. I'm going to skip over the skunk bit because I guess time is running out. Just this here of the new stronger cannabis. Well, it's true to a degree, but powerful drugs certainly existed when I was a youth. From Thailand, Hawaii, Kenya, South Africa, Jamaica, even more exotic locations like the Seychelles Islands, not to mention the hash from Nepal, Afghanistan, and Lebanon. In fact, anywhere that it grew indigenously, there was good stuff to be found. Some have argued that the skunk, which is the hydroponic stuff growing in the UK, deserves its own slot in the Misuse of Drugs Act schedule, a separate one from that in which ordinary cannabis is placed, but this is highly impractical, suggests that THC content varies widely. One can imagine that there's only be extra money for lawyers. With regard to increased use, what has happened in reality with the increase in use? Well, if anything, the use of cannabis has gone down since reclassification. According to the British Crime Survey, the use of cannabis amongst young people in particular has fallen since reclassification, though it has in fact been falling gradually since 1998. The BBC caused something of a stir when it reported in January 2005 that arrests for possession of cannabis had fallen by 1/3. Home Office figures demonstrated this was indeed the case, with just 46,000 arrests in the first year after reclassification, a drop of some 36%. This seemed to support the government's claim the decision to reclassify would free up resources that could then be concentrated on Class A drugs. However, the BBC report did not mention the fact that arrests for cannabis had in truth been falling for several years prior to the change in the status of cannabis. In 1994, some 81% of all drug arrests were for cannabis possession. The figures steadily dropped over the ensuing years to reach about 55% last year. It seems likely that the decision to reclassify was led by actual police practice on the street rather than driving the same from the top down, as our esteemed leaders would have us believe. So, it seems that cannabis is destined in the UK to remain as a Class C drug for the moment at least. What the overhauling of the entire classification system will bring is, at present, an unknown. It is underway as we speak. Perhaps we can look forward to a rational, constructed system of grading according to the physiological, psychological, and social harms associated with the various intoxicants we use, alcohol and tobacco included, a system from which the influence of prejudice, tradition, and big business interests have been removed, and in which all judgments of value are made explicit and backed up by reasonable argument. But do I sense a pipe dream? Finally, on the opening morning, we heard a lot about morals and moral use of drugs. And I would say this: smoking cannabis cannot in any way whatsoever be described as immoral. Arresting and jailing those who smoke it cannot really be described as anything else. Thank you very much.
I've actually been shattered to realize that after having smoked cannabis for 39 years, it seems that there is no chance of my becoming a reggae singer. Right. And I was working on my dreadlocks all this time. Well, anyway, on to something else. A man who brings his own dreadlocks is up next. I think that the key lesson here is Americans quite often tend to ignore the rest of the world. We do so at our own peril. We need to know two things. I mean, we need to look at the rest of the world in terms of two different aspects of it. What is it that we are doing to the rest of the world? Because we are who we are, the hyperpower. And we need to use our power around the world responsibly, and we are not. And it is not simply in Iraq or other places that we are causing problems by our ill-thought-out, ill-conceived, and corruptly pursued policies. The other thing is that the fact is that other countries are, have, because of